All right, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Doug Sandler from Turnkey Productions. And over there, that guy, the smart guy, this much smarter guy than me, the guy that knows not only how to do the right investment stuff, but he also does it with a smile and he does it very well. John Browning, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thanks. It's good to be here. And yeah, I think we've got some questions that have come up here recently that are just sort of burning questions. If one or two people has a question, I have a feeling a lot of other people have the same one. So
Thank God you didn't just blame this on me because normally this is my question that I am asking all the time. I'm like Chicken Little running around with my head cut off, thinking, how much money do I need to retire? I have no idea how to even answer that question, whether retirement comes sooner nor later, or whether I really can afford to retire, which is another big question too. But John, how do we figure out how much somebody actually needs to retire? That's a good starting point for this conversation.
yeah. So and of course this gets complicated and depends on your situation, right? And of course this is never investment advice. This is strictly information and opinion. But maybe we can give a little bit of guidance, right? And this, the reason that I think it might be relevant is I've had both sides of the spectrum recently. One individual gave me a call. She's 46 years old, and she and her husband got kind of a late or
Hmm.
felt that's a really important word,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
felt
yeah.
that they had gotten a really late start. The late start is relative, by the way. It is absolutely true, and I want to get this out there to all the young people listening, if there are any. Right, if you just save like $200 a month, right, $100 each paycheck, so you get two paycheck, $200 a month, and you're, say you just got out of college and you're maybe 22, 23 years old, just spare $200 a month and do that for 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 years. It's still not going to look like a lot of money. Then don't invest another dime, and you will have, my prediction, you will have plenty of money to retire.
John, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, and as soon as I disconnected from you on this recording, I called my son, who's 27, and I said, Adam, I said, Adam Sandler, yes, that is his name. I said, Adam, said save $100. Can you afford to save $100 a month without putting yourself in the poor column every month with your bills? And he goes, yeah, I can do that. I said, could you save $200 a month? And that's where we ended it. And he said, yeah, I can do it. And he just texted me probably 2 or 3 days ago. He said, I have now 2 months of this in the bank. Oh, this must have been a couple of months ago because he did say I have 2 months of this in the bank now, and I feel like it's great because it's just accumulating now. So thanks to you, John, and your recommendation, I told my son to do exactly that. I'm taking your advice, just so you know. If you don't think I am, I really am. I'm taking your
Oh,
advice.
that's good. That's good. Now here's the second part.
Yeah.
Here's the second part to it. All right. So the most common thing among successful investors is that they actually invest.
Okay.
so so now that he's got 2 months, the next step is, and with a small amount of money, an index fund, right? Just a low cost index. I recommend for someone like this an exchange traded fund
Hmm.
on, say, the S&P 500, or if they don't mind a little bit more volatility, the QQQY, which is the NASDAQ 100.
How does that relate to like he calls it a HYSA, a high yield savings account. So high yield nowadays is like 5.5%, which is
Yeah.
better than 0.25%, which is what it had been forever, but it's certainly not as good as 7 or 8 or 10% that you might be able to get. But there's risk attached to that too.
Well, those high yield savings accounts are generally, they're great. And for your emergency fund. So, oh, if I didn't ask this, I should have. Does he already have an emergency fund?
Yes, he's got a. I'm teaching him all the right things. I just wish I had learned this when I was in my mid 20s too, but I didn't have
No.
really the best example. But I'm like, hey, look, have 90 days worth of cash in the bank. God forbid you have an emergency and you need something. I don't know if I told him the right amount, but that's where I felt like the comfort zone was for him, 90 days.
Yeah, and that's probably right at, around that age and all that. So that's fine. If that's in a high yield savings account, Fantastic. And you know what? They're all very, very similar. I mean, somebody asked me the other day, well, which high yield savings account should I use? I mean, there's Marcus, there's just a ton of them out there, and they frankly are all just about the same. And there is not a lot of risk in there. That's a great place for your
Nice.
emergency fund.
Nice. And the thing that I had shared with him, which again, I think this is just kind of the lesson that you learn in setting up an account like this. It's not necessarily what you put it in. Certainly it's great that it's a high yield savings account as opposed to 0.25 or even 0% in a checking account. It's
Right.
the habit of getting involved. It's putting $200 away every month. And if you can do that habit every month for, years and years and years, you don't even feel it after it happens twice. It's done. Now I just every month it's just going to go in the account. And I love that he's doing it. And I love that he is putting himself on a different, we compete every month with credit score. So, he sends me his credit score, I send him my credit score, and we kind of have a little rolling joke about who can have the higher credit score. It's a good little competition we have going on.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Yeah. So that's the trick though. You start putting that, $200 a month, and then you actually get it invested. And then past that, it's what type of account is it invested in? And whether that's a retirement account, which you really should not put anything in that you think you're going to need in
Right.
the next 5 years.
One way
Or
in only, in
yeah,
only.
it's just one way. Yeah, it's in only. But if it's still something that's kind of sort of the secondary emergency account that, hey, I might want to buy a buy something with it, or I might have to buy something with it, then keep it in just a regular account, title in your name, and let it build. And maybe do that towards the end, and then towards the end of the year, if nothing has happened, take the majority of that and put that into something like a Roth, or some sort of IRA account. That's the way to get started. That's and like I said, some people just, well, I put the $200 away. Well, it's probably not going to grow like I was mentioning, right? Unless you get it invested in
Right.
the equity market.
All right,
So
so that's for somebody that is approaching you that's in their mid 20s. You started to talk about your mid 40s person that
yeah.
that wasn't sure if it was too late. And what other examples
So
do you have?
yeah, so yeah, she was like, "Oh, it's too late." Most people, so don't get disheartened, right? So some people get into their 40s and 50s and say, "Oh, it's too late." Woe is me. I'm a victim, right? These things are terrible. I'll never, never, and that is just not the case. My next book, I need to write one called "Starting Over at 50" because so many people end up doing that,
Yeah.
often for no reason that they caused. Sometimes it is, right? You made a bad decision, and oh well. So sometimes we do. Sometimes they had a medical illness, or they had one of their kids had an issue, or frankly, you all your money has just gone to supporting your
Ex-wives,
children,
ex-wives, John.
ex-wives, right? Something like that.
I know you've been married a long time. You got 6 kids. I know you don't know from this. But take it from a guy that does know from this is that, yeah, you start over. And that was about the age. I was around 50 that I started over. Fortunately, I didn't start over from zero, but when you give half away, that's a big bump off of the top line right there.
I can't tell you how many conversations that I've had with, and they're not all men, but the majority of them are men that say, my retirement's pretty much gone. I lost it in the divorce, or I lost a half or 2/3 of it in the divorce, or whatever it might be. And those guys, it's just super frustrating because they spend a lot of time building it up, and just got to get started over and make some maybe different decisions to get to where you
Yeah.
need to be in the right amount of time. But it is absolutely possible. But in this case, this young lady, because I think anybody in their 40s is young, um, she was very concerned. The reason they got in the late start is neither one of them made a lot of money to begin with,
Yeah.
and now they are. Um, and she told me how much money she has. I'm really worried because I plugged my information into a retirement calculator,
Okay.
and there are a bunch of them out there,
One
right?
size fits all calculator. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So she was convinced that, and she had plugged it all in there, and it came back with she and her husband needed $2.9 million in order to retire. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about, what do you like to do? Because my
Right.
whole thing, right, is build a life, not a portfolio. So
Right.
that
Right.
factors into how much you need to retire, right? If if your best life involves traveling around the world once a year or something, well, then you're going to need a lot more money than somebody who my best life is I want to curl up with a book up in the mountains and or hang out on the beach every once in a while.
I'm
That
good with Netflix. That's my best life. Somebody might be saying it's totally different than the guy that wants to cruise or the family that wants to cruise the globe together, every 6 months.
exactly, exactly. So when I looked at her situation, the great news was, hey, listen, you do not need first of all, you do not need $2.9 million. Second of all, based on what she told me that they already had saved up and what they were able to put away each month consistently, I said, here's the crazy thing. There is a possibility based on what you just told me, and I won't get into her specific numbers, but she could actually probably get to 2.5, $2.6 million, and that just amazed her. But I said, this is the way that it works when you're consistently in there and you still have some run rate to let that increase and let the magic of compounding happen. That's still a real possibility. And I said, here's the crazy thing. Let me tell you what you could generate in cash flow
Hmm.
once you get there. And it was more than she was making now.
Do you take into account things like, the magical annuity called Social Security? Do you take that
Yes.
into account? Okay, so you take every bit of income that's going to be coming in the door, and you count that as this is money that you're going to use to continue your lifestyle at the spot where you want to be, continuing.
Yeah. Everybody either forgets about Social Security or is just absolutely convinced that it's going to go away. So, not to get into that debate, but man, that would be political suicide for either party to say Social Security is going away. So I just can't get my mind wrapped around that. They will save it somehow. They will do something somehow to make that work. That said, there's a whole podcast on Social Security, when to take it, how to take it, what things to prepare so that it's not taxed, things like that. But but yeah, so you don't necessarily need those millions of dollars. I had another example um, of an existing client who said, "Okay, I need $10 million to retire."
Okay.
Wow. Okay, cool. This is good news for me because I get paid based on how many assets you have under management. So I was like, "That's great. Now tell me why." Why do you think you need $10 million? Because they're not an extravagant family by any means. Well, that I feel like that I wouldn't run out of money. Um, I wouldn't feel like I had to pinch pennies. I said, well, probably not. Um, again, all depends on whether you want to travel the world or whether you're okay with just going on a few vacations a year or something like that.
So
But
what are the sources of cash flow that you have at your fingertips when you get to a point where you're even considering what type of cash flow do I need in order to retire? Things like investment income, whatever dividends or money that's been paying for that, Social Security. Do you draw off of any of the principal that you have? Like how do you even determine what your cash flow is going to be when you get to a stage where you're stop the revenue generation coming in the door?
well, this is where things have really changed, right? Over the past 10 years even. And your traditional sources of cash flow are not the same as they once were. It used to be, strictly there were bonds, there were stocks, and there were annuities. Those were the places you get. There are more places now, and frankly, bonds is not a great place, my opinion.
Hmm.
Bonds are not a great place to get that cash flow. And to answer your other question, do you ever dip into the principal? And that has changed as well because our lifespans have extended.
Hmm.
So while many people tend to want to retire around, say, maybe that 65 age or something around in there, it used to be that our lifespan here in America was, well, it was like 70, right? Or maybe 75. Well, now that's out
Hmm.
for us guys who have a shorter shelf life, right? It's in the 80s. It's around 85, and this is all averages, right? And for women, it's even longer. So
Hmm.
you think about that. If you retire at 65, there's another 20 years where no money is coming in except for Social Security, and you've got to make up that difference. So how do you do that? And so there's this old idea out there that you can withdraw 4% of your total amount every year, and you'll be fine, right? And again, there's so many things out there that I feel oversimplify. I like to keep things as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's one of those sort of rules of thumb that maybe we shouldn't always live by. So at the beginning of retirement, what I suggest is try and get to the point where your monthly needs, weekly needs, whatever you want to measure it
Hmm.
by, can be taken care of by all 100% from the cash flow. That's going to make you very comfortable and me very comfortable. If you can't do that, we can talk about dipping into principal. But the goal, I think, is to have everything taken care of with the cash flow. Now, this is where people get into the trouble. They want to keep growing their account. And so they want to have more growth stocks in there, and I didn't own, name the stock, and again, not investment advice, but name Nvidia, Tesla, Intel, AMD, all those big exciting growth stocks that don't pay
Right.
any or much of a dividend. You got to get over that mentality and just you've got to get into the mindset that it's okay if my account stays fairly stable, and I'm doing great if I'm taking out $20,000 a year and my account is or 25 or 50 or $100,000, whatever it is that you need, and my account's staying stable. You kind of got to get to that point where you're okay with that, and
Seems like
that's a
you're even
tough
ahead. Seems like you're
psychological
even
barrier.
ahead of the game when that happens. If, my mom is a great example of all of the stuff that you're just talking about. She probably stopped working in her early 70s. She's 90, almost 91 years old. So she's been on Social Security and off of her investments, which is a small income that she makes. But every month she looks at her statement and she's like, hey, I took X amount of dollars a month that my investment person sent me X amount of dollars a month. I still have the same amount in principal. And it's been that way for like 5 or 6 years now. I feel like she's very fortunate to be able to experience what she has because she's not subject to that. Well, she's probably subject to the ups and downs, but the risk tolerance that a 91-year-old has is a lot lower than somebody that's 25 and can put it into Nvidia and cryptocurrency and all of the other things that are out there. So I agree with you 100%. She's not looking at accumulating, but she's looking at it properly. If she was looking at it accumulating, I'm like, well, you have nothing going in. How are you going to accumulate?
Right, right. And we'll have to talk about this sometime later too, about another situation that I spoke with someone about earlier this week, where they have and this is gets into the sandwich generation, which is where I am, and kind of where you are
Yeah,
probably a little bit
yeah.
too, right? Where you've got adult, but younger kids out there that you want to try and support as you can, and may have some needs that you'd really like to help them with. At the same time, you're worried about your mom at
Right,
91 years
right.
old, and is she
Yep.
going to have a long-term care event that she needs help with that gets very expensive, or what things do you need to do to take care of your parents? And so you begin to worry about both sides of that, and guess what gets sandwiched and squeezed in
You
between you?
you do you do as the person that's right in the middle because fortunately my kids are a little older. They're 27 and 30 and they're living and supporting themselves, but every once in a while there's a little blip that they need some help with. And my mom, it's the same thing. I just was back in Baltimore from the West Coast. I was back in Baltimore she needed a little help on something, and she's like, Just take it out of my account." And I'm like, "I'm not going to take it out of her account. She raised me." It's like,
Yeah, right.
that's fine. I'll just leave it. You just fine, mom. I'll send you an IOU. No worries about it. But you're
Yeah,
right. I wasn't really necessarily focused just on, fortunately, I'm able to still put away a couple of dollars every month. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that with all of this. Wedding a couple of years ago with my daughter. My son is about to go into the same scenario, and there's a lot of stuff that you want to be able to help out with if you can.
that's right. Yep. And like weddings, especially if you've got a daughter. Whew,
Weddings.
those are expensive.
How many of your kids are girls?
Three, but only one of them is married. So that was an expensive proposition, and
Yeah,
I was happy. We were happy to
happy
do
to
it.
do it. Right, happy to do it. Happy I can put that into my budget. Maybe not.
That was part of my best life, to
That's
be able
right.
to
That's
do
right.
that.
That's what you wanted. That's what you wanted to do. All right. So you've set up a few different scenarios here. So we're talking about where the cash flow comes from. So
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
talking.
So yeah, where the cash flow comes from, and so it come from. Again, I'm not a big fan, especially right now where the current market is here in 2024. Um, the bond market, and if you look back, the bond market over the past 5 years in general, has had a negative real return.
Right.
It's not good, folks. That is not good if you're in retirement and this just doesn't work well. And it hasn't acted as a hedge against equity securities either. And it just doesn't look like the bond math is really working out yet still. So you can get that. Annuities can be a great, and no, they're not expensive, and no, they're not a ripoff. They actually work really, really well, so long as you have a good, solid, experienced financial advisor, insurance agent that is advising you on what annuity works well for you. And they have features like long-term care built in often now that you wouldn't be able to get at the age 65, 70 years old. It just wouldn't make any financial sense, but you can get it built into your annuity, and it's a way to guard against that. So there's lots of features with annuities that work so well for a portion of your portfolio, not the whole thing. It's like too much of a good thing is actually a bad thing. I like ice cream, but I should not eat the whole pint. At least not anymore. I used
So
to, and that's fine.
it sounds like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like the answer to the question of how much money do you need to retire will change based upon where you are and what opportunities that you have ahead of you and what your life is going to be. There's so many variables that are in there. It's hard to put a rubber stamp on how much is enough to
But,
retire.
well, yeah, it is. You can't, right? I mean, you cannot, you should not put that rubber stamp on it. But it's those different ways to generate income, and when to. And I've talked about this a lot lately in my daily morning updates that I do, about shaving off some of those profits and maybe considering locking in those gains, which there is a way to do with an annuity. You can lock in gains. So you've made this great gain, right, over the last 6, 8 months. So
Hmm.
the stock market has been great, but you're at an age where, are you really comfortable taking that kind of risk? Well, you know what? Take some of those gains off. Maybe take what you made over the last 8 months, bite the bullet, grab it, put it into an annuity, lock that in. And there are annuities that will, and I can't say this very often, but there are annuities that will guarantee a 0%, at least a 0% return.
Right.
If that makes sense,
You
right?
can't you
So
can't lose your money.
can't lose it, right? You can't lose it. And guess what? There is possibility of gain, and there is possibility of consistent income on that money. So locking in that gain at a certain age makes a whole lot of sense. Um, Not necessarily for somebody under the age of 40. I mean, even maybe even 45. There's annuities may not make a lot of sense, but
So I'm
make a
hearing
whole lot of
different
sense.
different products for different age categories, different
Right.
vehicles to help get you there, different amounts on the other side of things, different amounts based upon the lifestyle that you of course want to live. And the reality of it is too, I look at where my mom is, and she's living in a home that's paid for. She's in a whole different environment where she doesn't want to travel. At 91 years old, her most comfortable spot is at home, watching TV, having playing cards with her friends, doing
That's
doing the
that's my
stuff.
dad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So for her, and maybe for a lot of people that are in their 80s and 90s, your lifestyle, building your best life or your best life, could be completely different than what your best life is at 65 or 70 years old. Is that fair?
That is fair. And no matter what age you are, generating some income that you can reinvest in the market or whatever makes a lot of sense. And again, if you don't want to use bonds, which I don't recommend at this point, again, not investment advice for you, but just as a general rule, there's something called a structured product that it has its ties back to the equity market, but there's some features in there that instead of being just exposure to the equity market, it actually generates consistent income, either monthly or quarterly or however you need it. And you can use that to either take some of the volatility out of your portfolio, is one thing that it does. And it also puts money in that you can either reinvest into another income producer or another more of those growth stocks, right? So there's a lot of different things out there that just didn't exist or didn't exist in any kind of form that the individual could use even 10 years ago. And now those are available for advisors who understand how they're used and have
So,
access to those.
so of course the question is then, well, what's the starting point? Like, how do you know what to do to get even started with this? If somebody is listening to this and they kind of have some plans put together, but they're not actually in concrete, and they don't know what they're doing. What's the first step?
Well, I mean, please call somebody. It's kind of
Okay.
like
All
I
right.
was
That's
I
step
was
one.
talking with a guy who puts pipes together, right? He's a pipe fitter, and he was explaining, you like to talk about what you do, and he was explaining to me how certain things work and didn't work, and how certain valves did one thing versus another thing, and how you had to pay attention to this and that. I said, that is fascinating. I have no idea what you're talking about, but that is actually pretty cool how they do this. And he was like, yeah, well, I have no idea how to do what you do.
Right. Right.
And by the
What's
way,
your
I've got some questions, right?
Nice. So the guy's working
Just,
on your plumbing and he's got financial questions. That's a good plumber.
yeah, right. And it's so here's the thing. Just who was it? Socrates, I think, said this one. I could be wrong. He said the greatest wisdom, or something, I'm going to get this wrong, but the greatest wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we can all just admit that for a second and ask at least the guys who have done it for 20, 30 years and have that experience, have used that tool for long periods of time, just get some help, and understand, what's a good advisor versus a bad advisor. And we had an episode on that. It's been a while ago, how to select an investment advisor that's right for you. And that may not be me. We may not gel. And I've actually recommended other financial advisors for people that, I didn't think were right for me, or I for them. But look around. I'm happy to talk with you and either help you myself or recommend somebody else. But here's the thing, and this is another thing that came up this past week, is a very successful person, 94 years old. Now they have a success problem because they didn't do a lot of planning, and now they're realizing they don't have a lot longer, right? They're having some health problems. And now the family is like, oh my goodness, we have a massive tax problem
Mm-hmm.
because of the way the accounts have been set up. They did everything that conventional wisdom said: maximize the 401k, maximize the IRA, and get an annuity. but it's an annuity that's going to come and it's going to be taxable when they take it out. Everything's been deferred and deferred and deferred. Well, at some point you have to pay taxes
Right.
on that, and it might be the heirs,
Right.
right? Well, how can you at least lower that? Well, they came to me and he's 94 and he might pass away before year end. So there's only so much we can do in that amount of time. But give me even 3 years or 5 years, we can make an enormous difference in how much is going to have to be paid out in taxes.
Well, that is sage advice. And if you're in that position where you may have some money that's all tax deferred, it may be an opportunity, and you feel like you're healthy now. Well, you might want to get in touch with John and somebody in his on his team to help put the right guidance together so that I don't know about you, John, but I think I've given enough money to the government.
There's,
I, I'm not
plenty of
sure.
money seems to have gone that direction.
I'm
Yes.
not sure I need my heirs giving any more of my money to the government. Let them have it, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, there are all sorts of ways. The earlier you start sort of planning that direction, the more you can make sure that that money is potentially even tax free to your heirs. There's a way to do that.
So, for those in our audience, if you want to get more information about what John does and how John does it, the best thing to do is text the word life to 321-421-5213. That's text the word LIFE to 321-421-5213. And you have a website too, John. So, why don't you share that?
It's guardianrockwealth.com.
Pretty easy.
Pretty easy. And
Getting
there's a contact us section. There's all the old podcasts are out there. The blogs are out there. Lots of free information, however you want to consume it. That doesn't cost you a thing.
213, actually 217 episodes of the Building Your Life podcast and the YouTube channel, which has countless more videos as well.
Yeah.
So, John, thanks for sharing your inspiration. Thanks for being here on the show today, and we'll see you again next week.
All right. We'll see you again.